Hi there. Businesses in the UK are calling for more immigration as the government says that it wants an end to low skilled migration and low wage economy. Now, business leaders have accused the government of putting the blame on them for the supply chain and the staffing crisis that have led to queues at petrol stations, the threat of Christmas being cancelled and no turkeys on the shelf. Apparently, people are already starting to order turkeys now in October for Christmas because they fear it's going to run out. But the government, these businesses are saying, look, it's not our fault that there's this supply shortage, and we want the government now to allow more immigration to plug the gap. I mean, there is 1 million job. There's a 1 million job vacancy gap in the UK, and they say the only way to solve it is through immigration. But in his speech to the Conservative Party, Boris Johnson said that he wants a high-wage, high-skilled economy, and that was being created in the wake of Brexit and the pandemic. And the country cannot just keep relying on immigration. I think one minister described it as you can't just pull down a lever and expect to just pull in more staff from abroad. Now, in response to the speech, the Federation of Small Businesses, which represents thousands of businesses up and down the UK, the chair of that is Mike Cherry, and he said that the Prime Minister's vision did not match the current lived realities of small businesses and sole traders. And earlier this week, Lord Wolfson, the boss of the retailer Next, and a Conservative Peer, so he sits in the House of Lords under the Conservative Party, said that overseas workers were the only way to solve labour shortages. He also criticised the government of their comments. So he wants more immigration. And in fact, in another interview, he said that he thinks that businesses should be able to, in a word, import as much labour as they needed from overseas to fill the gaps. Now, the current labour shortages in the UK include lorry drivers, I think it's around 100,000, healthcare workers, I don't know the number there, but they've always had a problem in the healthcare sector. I used to recruit workers for the healthcare sector from countries like the Philippines, Poland, Romania, and they've always had a problem, and they always will. And when they stopped immigration coming in from outside the EU, then care companies then went out to Europe to recruit. But now we've had the end of that. We've had the end of free movement in Europe. We're now in the Brexit era. Hospitality staff, you do see a lot of signs around restaurants and cafes saying staff wanted. And then there's agricultural and food processing workers. Apparently hundreds of thousands of those are needed in the UK. And the government has, in effect, fast-tracked some visas for these sectors. I think 10,000 visas from Europe for lorry drivers, HGV drivers and agricultural workers. But they want an end to low-skilled immigration following Brexit and the end of free movement of labour in Europe, which certainly in the UK. It has also granted around 5.4 million EU citizens the right to stay in this country. And many of those have had passports and long-term residence as part of that process in the run-up to leaving the European Union. And so they've done something, but that's only a small dent in the whole problem of the staffing crisis. As I said, I used to be involved in recruiting overseas staff, and I know that this is 20 years ago that the care industry was suffering from shortages. And really, the only way I think it did get sorted at the time was to recruit non-EU workers on work permits. That was managed migration as opposed to uncontrolled immigration from Europe, where they didn't need any papers to enter the country. But when you bring somebody in on a work permit, that permit is tied to that employer. It's not easy for that employee to just jump around and do. They certainly can't do any other work. They have to come and do the work they were given permission for. And normally the employers were happy with that because the workers tend to stay, they settled, they brought their families over. Sometimes the family members worked in say, the care home or for the hospital or the company they were working for. And it worked very well. And some of them are still there today. I meet some of the people who we helped to bring into the country, and they thank me for bringing them in. They say their kids have grown up here. Now, the kids have been to college and university, they're doing well. So that works. Whereas I always found that bringing in workers from Europe, particularly countries like Spain, where they were very fussy and didn't want to do the job and didn't like it, didn't like the weather, didn't like anything. That they would just come and go. And I'm telling you as it is. So if I'm offending anybody, I'm sorry, but that's tough. That's the way it is. When we went to Spain to recruit workers, some of whom were unemployed and had been unemployed, these were nurses, unemployed nurses, they said, well, I'm not sure, I don't really want to go. They turned their nose up at it. And if they did come, and we did get quite a few over, they would complain about the accommodation, they would complain about the conditions, they would complain about the hard work. Half of them left, within a few months. And this is after the hospital spent an enormous amount of money getting them over here and paying for accommodation and everything. Half of them, and if they didn't leave, they certainly wanted to be on holiday every month to go back to Spain. They just didn't like it. Whereas, I must say that workers from Eastern Europe were much more robust than that. But a lot of them were fickle as well, that they would come and go. And we know that during the lockdown, a lot of them did go back and perhaps not come back since. But they have got choices as well, because there's a big shortage of staff in other European countries, some of them paying better wages than the UK. So, we're in competition here. Germany, I think in Europe, there's a shortage of 400,000 drivers. Now, where these all come from, I just don't know. Where did this shortage come from? And I know that one of the problems in the UK of getting drivers is that the huge backlog of something like 50,000 licences at the DVLA, which is the government agency based in Wales, that obviously needs a rocket under them to get these licences out, because that is causing drivers who've passed their test to be stuck at home waiting for a driving licence to turn up for months at the DVLA. So if your licence is expiring, you better get it in quick, because don't expect the DVLA to turn it around very quickly. So that's what, Boris Johnson and other ministers have called on businesses basically to train and employ British workers, which owners have said is easier said than done. And, there are 1 million job vacancies in the UK, and, British people have traditionally shunned lower paid jobs, particularly in care and agriculture, two sectors which have come to depend on migrant workers. As I said, 20 years ago, that they said, look, we put out ads in the papers all the time. We put out ads on the Job Centre website, which goes all over Europe, and we just can't get workers to do those jobs. And this is in care work, nursing, agriculture. They've always had the seasonal agricultural workers visas, which brought workers over from, in those days, it was countries like Bulgaria, which was not in the EU. I'm thinking of Albania, Romania, and they were given temporary visas to come here for 3 to 6 months to pick crops or whatever they did, and then they would go back. So they would have no permanent rights to stay here. But that has worked well in the past. I think they're ramping that up again. But in a private meeting I was at the other day, a senior government minister said, that with over 1 million people in the UK unemployed, and something like 5 million people on some sort of benefit who may be working part-time, they get housing benefits called universal credit. It just makes no sense to keep importing low-skilled staff from overseas while taxpayers pay for people to stay at home. And he's got a good point there, hasn't he? But then, businesses say, look, we need staff now, we can't wait to train them and that sort of thing. And, of course, matching job vacancies with unemployed people is a challenge. Employers want people with the right skills, experience, they want motivated people, they want people in the right location. It's all right saying, well, there's all these unemployed people up in the northeast black spot, but will they come down to work in London or move and uproot everything to come and work in a prosperous area in the southeast, like London or some of the cities that surround London? Is it going to happen? Well, not often. I remember one minister from years ago was criticised for, I think his name was Norman Tebbit. He said, my grandfather didn't have a job. Did he sit around moaning about? No, he got on his bike and went to look for work. Now, the press, especially the left-wing press, slated him for saying that, but he was right. That's what his grandfather did. He got on his bike and went to places where there were jobs. And of course, that came to haunt him. That phrase, "get on your bike," "get on your bike, Tebbit," they'd say, and that sort of stuff. I think he's long gone now, but I tended to agree with him. Why don't people get on their bike? But is it going to happen? Matching these job vacancies, and then they want skills. There's not people sitting at home unemployed if they've got a driver's license and they've got authority to drive a lorry, they're normally out driving. They're probably not sitting at home. And a lot of these jobs vacancies are for skilled workers, and sadly, some of the unemployed people don't have those skills and training. Now, I was a former employer. We employed well over 50 people at one time, and I found it extremely difficult to recruit people from the local job centre. A local job centre is like a government agency that helps people who are unemployed find work. Admittedly, they do push people to get, if they're unemployed, they push people to go for interviews. They have to get to so many interviews. They have a job coach, I believe, that pushes them to get interviews. But candidates work unmotivated to take jobs. Even if you offer them the job, they frequently fail to show up for interviews. They sort of, went through the interview like they were going through the motion to tick the box to say that they'd been interviewed X amount of times that week. And, some of them put up all sorts of barriers. They said, well, I can't work more than so many hours a week because I'll lose my benefits. I have to take time off during the day to go and feed my dog. And one woman, I remember famously, she said, well, I can't lie for you. What do you mean you can't lie? I said, well, if I'm here because I'm a devout something or other, a Christian, I can't tell a lie and say you're out. And we never asked her to lie, by the way. So she put up these barriers almost to make sure that we didn't employ her. She didn't want the job. Another woman said she couldn't climb one flight of stairs to a first floor office, because she's not able-bodied, but she looked pretty able-bodied to me. She looked like, she hadn't done a day's work in her life, but she looked like she could climb those stairs. And a lot of them were stuck in this so-called benefit trap, which the minister actually mentioned, is where people are financially better off on benefits than they are taking a job. This is because if they come off the benefits, they lose things like housing benefit, which pays their rent. Now, rents can be expensive. So immediately they've got to, say if their rent is £600 or £700 a month, or maybe £1,000 a month, that means they've got to earn maybe £1,500 a month or £18,000 a year just to pay their rent before they've earned anything else. And, if you're giving them a job which is minimum wage, that doesn't amount to that. They're not going to have enough on a minimum wage job down at Starbucks to pay their rent and be better off than they are sitting on their backsides at home on benefits. That's just the way it is. And every government has said they'll try and solve this problem, but it's very, very difficult. It's not easy to just pull the plug from people and let them, literally go cold and starve. So it's always going to be a problem. And that's why businesses are saying, well, let's just bring in people from overseas. They're educated, they're smart. Some of them speak better English than the locals. They're motivated, they want to work. And I can't blame them for saying that, but the government are refusing to do that. They say one of the reasons people wanted to get out of Europe was to stop mass migration and uncontrolled migration, so they're sticking with that at the moment. And there's no plans to import low-skilled workers from outside the EU either. So if you're watching this and you're a driver based in the Philippines or India, I can't get you a job. You probably won't get a visa if you're low-skilled living overseas. You just won't get into the country if you're low-skilled. So there's no point in emailing me and saying, get me a job in the UK as a driver. No, it's just not going to happen. If you're a nurse, a skilled nurse with experience, if you're a doctor, if you're a scientist, if you're a PhD, yes, they want you in the UK. They want highly skilled people, but they don't want people if they're a barista in a coffee bar and want to come and work in Costa Coffee here. They just won't. It's not going to happen. So don't even bother emailing me. And if you want to get a job in the UK, then you need to usually go through your own approved agencies to find those jobs. I'm not a recruitment consultant anymore. I'm just giving you the news as it is. Now, staff shortages are causing wages to rise sharply. HGV drivers are now being offered something like, I think, £70,000 a year to drive a truck. Yeah, these are big trucks. They're not trucks you can drive on a standard license. You need to go through probably 6 months of training at the cost of £7,000 to get these licenses. It's not an easy job. It's not van jobs. And even farm workers, I think it's £1,000 a week some of the farm workers are earning to pick crops. But who's going to pay for this? These higher wages, as well as rising fuel costs, petrol costs, natural gas costs, will have to be passed on to consumers. And that's going to lead to fears of return to higher inflation or even stagflation, which is a combination of high inflation combined with low growth. Clearly, if petrol prices. Crude oil is reaching what, $80 a barrel. It's double what it was about a year ago. And natural gas prices are going through the roof as well. Who's going to pay for that? If the businesses are paying more for their staff costs, for their fuel costs to transport goods around, who's going to pay for it? Well, obviously, eventually it will filter down and be passed on to consumers. We're all going to have to pay for it. So that is already leading to higher prices in the shops. It's already leading to higher inflation, something like 4% at the moment. That's double what it was not that long ago, and certainly double the Bank of England's target. And the markets feel that inflation could reach 6% by the end of the year. Germany and America are also experiencing something like 15-year highs in inflation. Now, the governor of the Bank of England said inflation will be a temporary blip in the autumn and go away. I can't see that as it happened. No, I think the Federal Reserve said the same thing, it's temporary, but I don't think so. And, you combine this with reckless money printing on an industrial scale that has always led to, what we call hyperinflation in those days in pre-war Germany, the Weimar Republic, even to modern day places like Venezuela and Zimbabwe, which destroyed the Zimbabwe. I think it was the Zimbabwe pound or the Zimbabwe dollar was wrecked by this. People in Zimbabwe don't even bother using it now. They use the rand. They use dollars, as I think they are doing in many of these South American countries. Argentina had a similar thing, well over 100% inflation at one point. So I can't see how they're going to get out of this. The trillions of dollars in national debt in the UK, America. I don't know where it's going to lead, but what I can see happening is inflation. Now, inflation may be good news for some, because if you're investors and you hold shares or property, inflation makes that rise in price, and over the years you get richer while the average person gets poorer because their money is losing its value. It's losing its value if it's sitting in the bank. So if you've got $100 sitting in the bank, and it's 6% inflation, that means very soon it's going to be worth $96. That's the spending power of it. Also, if your wages are not going up by very much and prices are going up, you are in problems. You're falling behind, and that's what's starting to happen. So inflation is a very dangerous thing. Younger people might not remember high inflation. They might think, "What are you talking about? Inflation? What's that?" But I've lived through years when inflation was at over 20%, and it kept going up and up every year. And property prices then went up by 20% a year. But you weren't really any better off because everything was going up by 20% a year. Yes, if you had a string of properties, then maybe you are one of those that are better off. But the average person, so your house went up by 20%, but then when you wanted to buy a house, you're going to have to pay 20% more for the house that you are buying. So it was good in one way, but not brilliant for everybody. And of course, eventually the bubble bursts, as it always does. Now, I'm not saying properties are going to crash. I don't know. I don't know that answer. But, we did have warning signs of this, in China recently. I'll talk about this. But investors are still piling into stocks. Stocks are at an all-time high almost. Properties the same. And they're piling in like the party's never going to end. What does that remind you of? 1929, stock market crash. Maybe it reminds you of the 80s, the glorious 80s, good old 80s where everyone's partying. And even the run-up to 2008, massive bonuses paid to bankers and that sort of thing. And this week, another warning bell came out. Another Chinese property company, appropriately named Fantasia Holdings. Yes, living in fantasy land. They defaulted on interest payments to bondholders and lenders and told one company they probably couldn't pay their debt. And this follows the Evergrande debt scandal, the massive Evergrande 300 billion debt scandal. Could this be the tip of the iceberg? As I've been saying, that iceberg, we've got the tip appearing above the water, and down below there's lots of things going on. Because if there are two companies in trouble, two property companies, what about all the other property companies? What about people that supplied them? What about people that paid deposits for these flats that may never be built? What's going to happen there? I think there's more problems in China than they're letting on. That's why the government have tried to rein in the debt crisis. And if China have problems, then it will lead to worldwide problems. They're saying that if America sneezes, the rest of the world gets a cold. Well, now China is the second largest economy. So if they sneeze, we could be in for some Asian flu, pardon the pun. But they sneezed last year and the rest of the world has got this virus now. We can't mention that. But let's face it, if China goes down, then they're going to bring a few people with them, and many countries, because we're selling a lot of stuff to China. And China buy a lot of properties abroad as well, fueling stock market, property bubbles in Vancouver, Sydney, New Zealand, Auckland, London even. It's crazy what's going on. Toronto is another city where property prices have gone ballistic. So just be careful out there. Now you might say, I'm not worried because I don't invest in stocks or property, but maybe you do. Have you had a look at your pension fund recently? Where does your employer's pension fund actually invest? Where do they invest? Probably the stock market, maybe the bond market, and property. Those are the typical things. So if you want to learn more about this, the best way to, I think, stay informed is to educate yourself on financial matters. And the key to building wealth and keeping money and wealth is financial education. We've all seen these stars who make it big and then blow it all. I've written about it here. Stars who've made, in my book, stars who've made hundreds of millions of dollars and blown it. They're bankrupt, they're bust. They're scraping around on TV reality shows to make a living. So you need education as well as money to keep it. I think Shaq O'Neal said that. You need the education to keep the money that you're making. So the key to keep building it is education. Millionaire habits can be tracked and followed. We've seen they've been studied over and over again at universities, in Harvard studies, and in books like Think and Grow Rich and The Science of Grow Rich, which was written over 100 years ago. And I've written about it in my own book, Yes, Money Can Buy You Happiness. So if you want to know more about this and you want to know more about how you can build wealth and keep wealth, not by just thinking, well, let's pile into the latest fad like Bitcoin or whatever. But if you want to learn the central way to keep wealth, then follow my free training here. I'll put a link up. It's a kind of a short webinar, but it's a free training, and it will give you an idea of how you can become financially free very, very quickly, but without working any harder. So thanks for listening, and I wish you all a great weekend ahead, and just be careful out there when you're investing, because we are still in choppy waters here in terms of the economy. And thanks to everyone who tunes in on Facebook, and please like the posts, share them to give more free content to people, and also to the people watching on YouTube. Great to see your support there on YouTube. Please subscribe and like the post as well. Hi there to Ronnie out there in Denmark. Good on you, Ronnie. Hope it's not. I know the weather's been okay out there, and I hope the property market out there is treating you well as well. So have a great weekend, everybody. Great to see you.